If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. In this episode, we are joined by the author of Counterclockwise, Using Peptides to Renew, Rejuvenate, and Rediscover, Dr. Suzanne Ferree. Dr. Ferree is a senior physician at Vine Medical Associates in Atlanta, Georgia. She is double board certified in family medicine, anti-aging, and regenerative medicine. Dr. Ferree uses bioidentical hormones, peptide therapy, neural therapy, and regenerative medicine to treat patients with endocrine, mitochondrial, infectious, autoimmune, and neurodegenerative diseases. Listen in as we learn about peptides, peptide therapy, and how peptides might help us to age well. So, Dr. Ferree, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. Let's begin by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became interested in regenerative medicine.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate this. I started out just practicing regular family medicine years ago and found that I had patients who were sick that I couldn't figure out what was wrong through normal channels. So I knew that they were sick. And in the past, I would have probably diagnosed them with a Prozac deficiency and, treated them with Prozac or something like that, or said they needed to go to therapy. And not that doesn't also need to happen in many cases, but there were things wrong that I did not have the education or the tools to treat at that point. And so I had a patient who wrote me a prescription who brought me her prescription for her bioidentical hormones. And I said, hey, she asked me if I could fill it for her. And so I sent it to the pharmacy. The pharmacy said, hey, we don't think you know what you're doing. Can we send you to a conference? And so I went to this little conference here in Atlanta called Get Out of Line, where they talked about all these things that are available to us, tools that I had no idea, like I'd never learned about them in medical school, like bioidentical hormones. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a bioidentical hormone. I thought it was all the same. And so to learn all of this and to learn what some of the symptoms of hormone deficiencies or peptide deficiencies or other things, to learn that some of these illnesses like MS are related to infectious diseases. All of that was brand new information to me. And it speaks to the gap between bench medicine, bench chemistry, and what we practice in the clinic. There's a big difference between those. And there's a gap in the leap of information from one to the other. I think in medical school, they sort of teach us to wait on the drug reps to tell us what to do. And so, we get to this point where we are now, and it requires us to continue to be curious, us as providers, to continue to be curious, to continue to do research and go back and look at the available research. I mean, I probably look at 4 or 5 articles every morning, just trying to keep up with the huge volume of information that's out there to help us take care of our patients.
So what are peptides and how do they play a role in healthy function?
Oh, yes. So peptides are small strings of amino acids. Think about a chicken breast, for example. We know that chicken breast is primarily protein, a little bit of fat, primarily protein. And so if those proteins are greater than 150 amino acids long, so the body takes these little tiny pieces called amino acids, strings them together in a special sequence. Each one, depending on the sequence of amino acids, has a different function in the body. We make thousands of these every single day. And so they perform all kinds of functions like enzymes. They create muscle. They do all these things so that we can function in our day-to-day. A peptide is merely a smaller version of that. So by convention, we call greater than 150 amino acids a protein, between 50 and 150 amino acids, a polypeptide, and under 50 amino acids, a peptide. Below 4 amino acids, we call that a bioregulator peptide. Because they're so small, they're able to translate into the nucleus of the cell and actually have direct effects on DNA transmission. Those are just by convention how we decide. So your body's making these peptides every single day. As we age, we get into our 60s, even into our 40s, we decrease how many of these peptides we make on a regular basis. So our bodies are less well able to function than they did when we were in our 20s. We all feel that if we are in our 40s or above.
So how do peptides function to reverse the effects of disease and aging?
So it depends on which peptide you're talking about, but truly, there's a cluster of them that work on the thymus gland. The thymus gland is involved in the immune system. So we know with this big pandemic we just had that the immune system is compromised in our elderly patients. That's why so many of them had such a rough go with that illness. And your body decreases its production of these peptides as we age, so we're not able to do to respond to infections as rapidly as we can when we're in our 20s. There's another group of peptides that are involved in helping the cell to be more efficient in its ability to create and use energy. So every single cell of your body, your skin cell, your heart muscle cell, your liver cell, has to have adequate energy in order to be able to do its job. If it doesn't have that kind of energy, it's not going to be able to do that. And these peptides can help the cell to improve the way they use energy. Many more of them are involved in the way that the mitochondria work. So the mitochondria are not only the energy generators, but also the boss or the directors of the way that the nucleus, which is where all of our DNA and information on how to make our cells, where that all lives. And so not only does the mitochondria make energy, we learned that in high school biology, but now we know that the mitochondria also are involved in helping the nucleus to be able to decide how it's going to function today. Am I going to be at my optimal, at my peak, or am I going to be functioning in sort of a more sluggish, restful way, much like you or I might do on a lifting day or a rest day?
To what degree can we turn back the hands of the clock of aging?
So that's a great question. As far as research in humans goes so far, there was only the one TRIM study that showed that using growth hormone, we can get about 2 years of age decrease. And the study that was done with the humans in calorie restriction. The downside is almost no one's going to maintain calorie restriction. So using calorie restriction is probably not a really efficient or effective long-term means. And that's why we've looked for other options. So the really only study that's been done that's demonstrated a decrease in aging is the TRIM study with humans. And it was about 2 years of improvement in longevity in that study.
So on the Aging Well podcast, we try to promote proactive approaches to aging well. And you've kind of alliterated to this already, or alluded to it a little bit. How can peptides play a role in aging successfully beyond just simply treating disease?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that they do, exactly as I was mentioning a minute ago, is improve the way the immune system is able to respond to an infection. So I think about the immune system as having sort of two branches, and you can be in this antibody creating state, or you can be in this fighting off disease and diseases state. And so the people who we know are having immune-related diseases like lupus, for example, where they have their immune system is attacking their own body, or Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Your immune system is attacking your own body. We know that immune dysregulation is involved in plain old osteoarthritis, in things like chronic kidney disease. So this immune dysregulation is there all the time. In diseases. So if we can reverse that and allow the body to instead be able to fight off some of these chronic infections like chronic CMV, chronic EBV, fight off some of these chronic infections, as well as be able to prevent the onset of things like cancers with immune regulation, appropriate immune regulation, and immune flexibility to be able to create antibodies when it's appropriate, but also to be able to go to the other side where they're able to fight off infections and cancers when they need to. That's a very efficient immune system. So the other thing that we can do with peptides is be able to improve the function of mitochondria, improve the energy generation and use by the cell. So if your brain cells, for example, have a difficult time creating energy, they're going to result, that's going to result in a situation where you develop dementia. Or earlier, you may develop things like ALS or Parkinsonism. All those sort of neurodegenerative diseases can occur because of an inefficiency in the way that the cell is able to function. So cells begin to die, they go through that senescence kind of state, and now we don't have the ability of the cells to regenerate themselves. And the effect of that is the neurodegenerative diseases.
So it almost seems like it would benefit someone to take in as much protein as possible, but different types of protein from different sources. That way they're getting, all the different types of peptides after those proteins get broken down. Is that a correct thing to assume of what I'm hearing you say?
That's a great way to think about it. What I would say is I want to make sure you're getting all of the essential amino acids. There are essential amino acids and there's non-essential amino acids that we can make ourselves. And so if we're getting all the essential amino acids, which comes from most sources of protein, then we should be able to get what we need and make them. The problem is, as we age, our body, because when you eat food, let's say you eat a chicken breast, your body's going to break that down into its amino acid and fat components. And then your body will rebuild those amino acids into the proteins or peptides that your body needs. The problem is, as we age, we don't tend to make the proper proteins or peptides, let me not say proper, let me say more useful proteins and peptides that we made when we were in our 20s. And so what you eat is broken down, and then what you make from that is dependent on your age and the health of your whole body, of your body as a whole. And so it becomes this sort of self-perpetuating problem. I'm already older. I already don't make the right peptides that I need to from the amino acids I have. And so now I either need to take exogenous appropriate peptides, or we need to tune up the health of the cell. And I would actually say in my practice, we do both. So exercise, sleep, eating a proper diet, all of those are particularly helpful, as we know. Maintaining a low stress life or figuring out ways to manage stress is going to come up. That's really where we want to go.
So I was first introduced to peptides through some of my students, particularly those that are in the kind of really into the fitness area, bodybuilding and those types of areas. So I'm going to kind of deviate a little bit, and then I want to come back to your practice. But how can peptides play a role, or do they play a role in some of these different supplements that are out there and things that people are going after is, taking peptides to improve X or Y, whatever it is in their fitness?
What's interesting is, this is a great question. What's interesting is most of the peptides don't really have specific research in improving strength or endurance by a significant enough degree. What I mean by that is what they really do is improve recovery. So when we look at things like growth hormone secretagogues, for example, Sermorel and Tesamorel that are FDA approved, when we look at things like some of the mitochondrial peptides like MATA-C and humanin and SS31, when we look at all of these, we're not finding that people are getting significant improvement in their strength or speed. We're seeing really that they're able to get back to sport faster, which ultimately results in their improvement in strength and speed because you can go back to sport. But if you're not doing that, if you're not participating in a 2-a-days or whatever, then you're not going to have that great of a degree of, for me, I'm a competitive power lifter. And so I know if I'm not taking my peptides on a regular basis, it's difficult for me to make my 2-hour, 4 times a week training sessions because I'm still sore from the last training session. And so that's how it helps me, is it helps me with my recovery.
I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging. Okay, so you also use bioidentical hormones, peptide therapy, neural therapy, and regenerative medicine to treat patients with a variety of endocrine, mitochondrial, infectious, autoimmune, and neurodegenerative diseases. Can you tell us a little bit more about your practice and how these treatments help us to age well?
Sure. What I'm trying to find, there are patients who just don't respond to various things. So what happened in the beginning? I started putting all of my patients on bioidentical hormones, adjusting their levels, trying to get them to where they were feeling better. And that got a significant number of patients better. But then there was still a segment of patients that just didn't quite get better. So I'm looking for what's the next thing that I need to do to treat these patients. And so all of it starts with, we usually start with treating the gut. That's where everything starts. The immune system gets triggered in through the intestines. So if we can repair gut health, that's where everything starts. Sometimes we'll use neural therapy for that. Sometimes we'll use supplements for that. Obviously, we'll use generally healthy lifestyle. Sometimes we use peptides for that. Then we'll move on, and depending on what their disease state is, we'll improve their immune response, we'll improve, and all of that happens piece by piece until the patient feels better. Most of these people haven't been sick just for a week. They've been sick for 10, 15, 20 years. So it's not going to happen overnight to recover them. But a patient might come in and we would say, hey, you have intestinal symptoms. Let's do celiac ganglion infiltration with some procaine. That's part of neural therapy. Let's treat your teeth that may be the original interference field. Let's put you on some glutamine and some IgG and maybe some lorazepam, which is a peptide, to help repair the gut, maybe some KPV, and then start you on some immune therapies as well. So it's a stepwise sort of approach to restoring the patient's overall health. And it varies from patient to patient depending on what they need.
So without revealing any personal information, do you have a particular favorite success story you'd like to share?
Sure. Yes, we have a patient who has progressive MS, and she was sort of having these repeated episodes over and over again. And then we put her on some lifestyle modification, diet changes, et cetera, and then had her go on a couple of peptides that help both with immune response and cellular health. And she has not had a flare now in about 8 months, which is a really long time for her. So we're super excited about that. Hoping to see her continue to improve. The majority of our clients are like entrepreneur athletes, people coming in with, let's say you have a meniscus injury, and we can treat the gut because we're trying to improve overall inflammation to keep arthritis from developing. We'll do things like localized injections, but also intra-articular injections for those patients, and then optimize their health overall so they're able to get back to functioning in both their sport and their career.
So what about the person who is wanting to just kind of do the over-the-counter peptides, or is interested in peptides for their own personal health benefits? They're not really significantly diseased. They might just be kind of a more recreational athlete or more serious athlete like yourself that is just kind of looking to improve recovery and just improve performance. What are your recommendations to them in terms of approaching peptides in their kind of daily supplement plan?
I would say, first of all, it's really important that you find a provider who knows what they're talking about to help you with that. But if you're really just looking for over-the-counter things, there's a couple of companies that I think do a really good job. I can recommend them for sure. I really love Healthgevity. I think they have 2 products that do really well that we use regularly here in the practice. They have several products that do really well, but peptide related products that we use a lot in the practice. And then there's a company called Level Up that does a really great GI repair. It has 3 intestinal peptides in it. It's an amazing product for our patients who have things like Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, et cetera. Those obviously are not patients who should be treating themselves. Those are patients who should be under the care of a physician. And if you're using peptides, should be under the care of a peptide specialist. And there's probably 500 or so of us in the country right now. So they should be relatively easy to find.
So ideally, not do it yourself. Go to your doctor first and get the recommendations, get the proper products, and so on.
Yes. Now there are some topicals. So if you are interested in just skin aging, there's a topical GHK product that we use a lot by Vitali Skincare. They do a really great job with their topical anti-aging skincare line. Works really great for skin injuries as well. So that's another place. And it contains the copper peptide GHKCU.
Would that help with like eczema and stuff to that effect?
So interesting that you say that. Eczema, it may help with the actual lesions of eczema, but eczema is an intestinal problem. So if we can get that inflammation turned down, and that may be something that would respond to the oral peptide that I mentioned a minute ago that's available through Level Up.
And how much does peptide treatment cost?
Depends. Often the providers will have an annual fee or a per hour fee for their consult, and then depending on the peptide, they're going to run somewhere between $200 and $1,000 per month for the treatment, depending on which peptide it is. Some are more complicated to make than others. There are lots of bioregulators that are available online that you can find. They're pretty easy. The more effective ones are the KPV, and that would be something that you could consider. That would also be something you could consider for that eczema, is using KPV. Again, that's a prescription, so not easily obtained necessarily over the counter. But most of the time, you're going to run somewhere between $250 and $1,000 a month for peptide.
So, in healthcare insurance would probably cover that better than you trying to pay for it out of your pocket, then, right?
Healthcare insurance does not cover it at all.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, that's not 100% true if you're talking about things like the peptides that are available. Semaglutide is available. That's a peptide. A lot of these new migraine medications, the CGRPs, are peptides, and those are available through our insurance. A lot of the pharmaceutical companies are picking up on these peptides because they are so effective. So I believe in the next probably 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a lot of the peptides we've been using are going to start to be available through your pharmaceutical company, and therefore your insurance company will be approving them at some point.
All right. Now, you've alluded to a little bit of this already, but something we ask of all our guests are, what are you doing personally to age well?
Mm-hmm. Thanks for asking. I have set a regular sleep time. I'm pretty diligent about that. I go to the gym 4 days a week. That's a big part of my life. I try to limit environmental toxins, exposure to environmental toxins as much as I can, including EMF, which is probably the hardest one to avoid. I do regular meditation and probably about 20 minutes, 30 minutes twice a day as part of my just general maintenance, journaling, trying to keep my stress levels as low as possible. And then I take a bunch of peptides. So, and they rotate around. Right now I'm on melanotan, GHK topical. I'm taking oxytocin, VIP, and I believe I'm on CJC epinephrine right now.
Wow. How can our listeners find your book? And are there other ways that our listeners can they connect with you? Do you have a website or social media?
Mm-hmm. So I'm on Instagram at Dr. S. Ferree, DRSFERREE. I'm on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, and that is at Dr. S Cellular Medicine, DRS Cellular Medicine. Those are probably the biggest ways. My website is Vine, as in grapevinemedical.com. And the first chapter of the book is available for free on that. It's a e-book that's available on that website. It's vinemedical.com/counterclockwise. And the book will be out this week, I'm hoping. I just approved the ebook this morning, so hopefully we'll get it out to Amazon and Barnes & Noble online as well.
That's exciting.
Yeah, we're excited about it. It should be really fun. It's been a labor of love for sure.
So how do you have a bedtime when you do so much? I mean, you almost, I guess, have to have that bedtime. But, you have checked basically all of our boxes that we talk about on this podcast in terms of what you need to do to be aging well. It's exercising, maintaining healthy body composition, getting plenty of sleep, having a bedtime. Corbin always makes fun of me for having a bedtime, but I go to bed same time, get up the same time pretty much every day, 7 days a week. Our big thing that you didn't mention, but I'm certain that's not in your daily habits, is smoking.
Oh, right. So, yeah.
And what else do we miss, Corbin? It's like pretty much everything on our checklist. And it's everything I teach my students in my pathophysiology class. It's like, these are the things that you need to be doing or not doing in order to age well. And it comes down to very basic lifestyle that can help us. And it sounds now like the peptides can even help further that even more. Maybe tweak out a few more extra good years out of us than just simply exercising and not smoking.
Right. We know that most of these peptides are depleted in the body by age 40. So if I can replace them, much like you would do testosterone or estrogen when you deplete those, if we can replace them, we are telling our DNA that we're younger. So you begin to transcribe different genes that you may have transcribed when you were younger.
So, and that brings up kind of an interesting question when you bring up testosterone therapy and like many of the different hormone therapies that someone might be under. Which really should come first, the peptide therapy or the hormone therapy? Is that or even something that you would be able to answer?
So I think it depends on the patient. That's my big picture answer. But in general, I would say probably correcting hormones would be what I would do first. It depends on how sick they are and from what. So in my patient who had the MS, we didn't go to hormones first. She was already in her 60s, had not been on hormone therapy when we saw her first. So this was not someone I was going to jump to hormone therapy on, but she is now on some hormone therapy. So but in a general patient who comes to the office, I'm usually going to start with hormones first because that clears a good number of illnesses. We know that the inflammasome, which is part of the inflammatory part inside the cell, it's sort of like the bomb that's created in the cell that can cause a lot of disease. That inflammasome is triggered by a drop in hormones. So if we can correct that or prevent that from happening by starting when they're in their 35, 40 even, we may be able to prevent that inflammasome from being created in the first place. It's all about getting ahead of the curve.
Now, is there any kind of connection to males always kind of gravitate to testosterone therapy because, they feel like their testosterone has dropped and they're not able to maintain their muscle mass and those types of things. Is that as critical as some of the hormonal changes in women that we see? Because we know that estrogen is really tied to a lot of, female conditions. And it would seem to me that it's a little bit more important and I'm not as educated as you in this area. That's why I'm asking the question. It might be a little bit more important for women in that hormonal therapy than men just kind of jumping on the board. Oh, I'm 60, I should be on testosterone.
What's interesting is we ignore men's osteoporosis risk because in general, men are lifting heavier. So you're causing more trauma on your bones. So you're repairing your bones consistently for many, many years. But men begin to develop osteoporosis early, and not having testosterone on board can make a big difference. The other thing is in both genders, both sexes, conversion of testosterone to estrogen is critical. So obviously more of it is converted in women than in men, but in men, a small amount of estrogen is required for maintenance of long-term memory. So in a lot of our bodybuilders, for example, they're really trying to suppress that estrogen to almost zero. And I think they're doing themselves a disservice because, so I end up having to correct their regimens quite a bit when they come to me because they're missing that critical piece of estrogen in men's brains. You don't need a lot, little tiny bit, but there is a critical amount of estrogen that's required to maintain memory in men and to help keep that neurodegenerative disease at bay. So we do it is important in men as well. So looking at osteoporosis, and then in general in your vitality. So I'll have a man who'll come to me and say, I'm just not motivated to go to work anymore. I'm just not motivated to take care of things I need to take care of. That's a really big sign of testosterone deficiency. And so if my patient as a man is using the word motivation, saying I really just I'm tired, I don't feel motivated, that's where my brain immediately goes. And so in order for men to feel like they can be productive, like they can contribute, like so that they have passions about the world and about their lives, it's important for them to have that testosterone. That's one of the hormones that gives that to them. So not having enough can really deplete that. It also increases the percentage of body fat when you have low testosterone, or particularly when you're converting a lot of your testosterone to estrogen. Men will have a particularly high percent body fat. And that can be problematic for lots of reasons. Number one, because it's inflammatory. A high percent body fat is really inflammatory.
It's interesting you mentioned osteoporosis in men. I personally feel like we're going to see a bit of a shift. I mean, not a certain crossover effect, but that, with women and, Title IX being kind of in my generation and more women are engaging in weightlifting and finding it, more appealing and more interesting and more acceptable, that women are starting to do the things that are going to decrease some of that risk of osteoporosis, maybe not perfectly, but men, because we're becoming increasingly sedentary with our computer lifestyles and everything else, are likely to see an even more increase in some of that because we're becoming less manual and more sedentary as time goes on. Would you agree with that?
I think that's a really wise observation. Yes.
Of course, I have a wise observation. I should underscore that to my staff. I have to play that little clip to my students.
Most of the women in the gym I go to is a powerlifting gym or a strongman and powerlift. So it's not like a regular, Lifetime Fitness or Planet Fitness. And so the women who are in there are almost all in their late 40s and 50s. The women who are lifting heavy, to your point, we're in the gym, and there are several of us who compete at this level. It's not like there was when we were in our 20s. There's a lot of women that compete in their 20s, but there are women who compete in their 50s and 60s in strong person competitions. So it's kind of exciting. You're right.
We actually have a guest coming up in a couple episodes who is a woman who had MS and was in a wheelchair and took that from being in a wheelchair to being a European Masters powerlifting champion. So I'm really curious to hear her story and how she got there.
Well, and you can't ignore the contribution of myokines to our reversing our aging. The muscles that are an actively contracting muscle, a muscle that's being used, produces myokines, those chemical messengers that tell your DNA everything's fine. Let's be more youthful. Let's produce the more youthful proteins. Those myokines are critical in our anti-aging. We don't just say exercise, but just because we say exercise, there's a reason why exercise is valuable, particularly over the age of 40, doing more resistance exercise, because that resistance is what produces those myokines to help your body overall aging more slowly.
Thanks for mentioning that, because that's one of the things we really push on this podcast is that, strength training needs to take a much greater focus as we age. And we got to get past this kind of historic view in exercise science that cardiovascular health is the most important. Not that it's not important, but what I've observed over my many, many years is that those who have pushed to the cardio side are the ones that are not aging as well. They become much more frail, they're slow down because they can't do as much. But those who are resistance training can continue to maintain that cardiovascular health, but they're also kind of doing all the things that are much more anti-aging.
Yes. And I think that's partly because the endurance athletes are catabolic. They're in a fairly catabolic state. I would say I'll claim responsibility for us as women doing that. We tend to undereat and overtrain. And it's not that we're overtraining, we're just undereating for our degree of training. And so we get into a catabolic state. It's really, really critical. I can't remember, I think it was Bill Campbell was talking about an article where they had increased the number of protein calories by 300. This is in trained female athletes, had increased the number of protein calories by 300 calories a day, something like that. And the women actually lost weight. So for me to be able to convince my female athletes, you have to increase your protein intake, you have to increase your protein intake, it's really a huge hurdle for them to come over. So I'll pull that article out for them over and over again and say, you've got to read this article. I'm not playing around. This is really serious. You have to increase your protein calories in order for you to maintain your muscle mass and not be catabolic. And so what I mean by catabolic is high cortisol, high thyroid hormone, where you are breaking everything down instead of building things up. And that state, as you're suggesting, we're not just breaking down body fat, we're breaking down brain and liver and kidneys and heart and everything in addition. So it's really, you're right on track with that.
I had a client a number of years ago. I mean, it's been probably 30 plus years since I've been a personal trainer and gone academic route, but I had a woman I was working with and she was working really hard. She came in 3 days a week. She was pretty fit. She was trying to still cut some body fat and she was saying her weight loss had really stagnated and she couldn't lose more weight. And I said, okay, well, let's look at what you're eating. And I said, you need to eat more. And she's like, but I'm trying to lose weight. I said, no, you need to eat more. And so we shifted the diet a bit and boom, she started losing weight. Mm-hmm. It's like a lot of people think we just got to be in this caloric deficit to such an extreme. But the reality is it's do the right exercise, get the right food into you, and then your body will make the right shift.
And it's timing of nutrients when you're before your exercise or whatever. But when I'm trying to convince people to switch over from that heavy cardio to the more resistance type training, what I will tell my cardio people is, I need you to do 15 minutes of cardio a day. That's it. And and what I want you to do during that 15 minutes is a high intensity interval. So you're doing a 15-minute HIIT workout, and then the rest of your workout is all resistance. So the myocardial benefits, the mitochondrial benefits, all are demonstrated just with that. I'm also asking you this question. Am I right to be telling them that? Because that's what I've read.
No, I would agree with that entirely. I mean, I think a lot of it is we tend to emphasize the areas that we're trying to improve. And we think burning calories, we just have to burn as many calories in that workout. And we don't realize that doing a more high intensity interval type training is going to have a very pronounced stimulus to the cardiovascular system without putting a lot of time into it. We're taking less beating on our joints and everything else. And we're giving more time to our bodies to heal, recover, but also to do the other exercises. So there's a lot of different factors that kind of contribute to that. But I'm much more in favor of a higher intensity interval type training, a few times a week to kind of get that stimulus for the cardiovascular system, but also to, allow for us to be burning some calories. There's mixed evidence in terms of how many calories we burn after the fact with the high intensity interval training. But there's enough evidence that probably suggests that we are at least boosting our metabolism a bit. And if it's even 2 calories an hour over a 24-hour period, those calories add up over the course of the year.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Corbin, do you have any last minute questions for the doctor?
No, I'm just fascinated with everything. I actually have been really looking forward to having you on. I was telling Dr. Armstrong, I've been diving into a lot of research with peptides. So just hearing an actual professional come in, I'm really grateful because this has been a great opportunity. So thank you.
This has really indeed been a very fascinating conversation, and we thank you. We enjoyed having you. Is there anything else you would like to share with the listeners before we sign off?
No, I just got word as we were talking that my book, the ebook, is available on Barnes & Noble right now. Yay!
Awesome. So we'll put links to that in the episode notes so that everybody can get access to the book. And we'll make sure that the listeners are getting your book. So we thank you again, and we hope you'll keep aging well.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
You too. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.